And good afternoon. This is Ted Hicks from Late Night Parents. Ways to follow our show is latenightparents.com. It's a blessed occasion because Dr. Derek Ochiai is here, a leading board-certified orthoscopic hip surgeon and sports medicine expert from beautiful Arlington, Virginia, is on the line. Dr. Derek, how you been?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Ted?
Pretty good. It's been about 3 years since we last talked. It can't go this long.
Been that long?
Yes. We were talking about Peyton Manning, and we were talking about his hip. Man, it seems like such a long time. Oh, man. How's life been treating
time
you?
Flies. I look at my kids, and I just think, what happened? My son's taller than I am.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. I mean, it's great. So life has been treating you good? You and your family good?
Yeah, we're great.
Oh, that's wonderful. I guess since the last time we talked, we actually do a Sunday night radio show, and I know you're very busy, so this is going to have to be our part of our Sunday night, this part of our discussion, and hopefully sometime in the future, preferably before the baseball season starts, we can get you on live on our Sunday night show.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's two different categories I want to talk about today, primarily about youth sports. We know of 30 million kids that are playing in sports. 2.6 million will get injured. So there's 30 million children and adolescents participating in youth sports. Of that 30 million, more than 2.6 million children aged 0 to 19 are treated in emergency departments each year for sports or recreation injuries. But we're going to blink our eyes. The spring will be here, and then summer is usually when kids are playing some sort of sport on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. We'll initially jump into football because my son, for the last 2 years, has been participating in youth football. I got to tell you, Dr. Derek, I've been cringing every time there's a helmet-to-helmet hit, and yeah. I've kind of been asking my son, okay, are we done with this? Are we going into baseball? Are we going to go into lacrosse or something like that? If you can give us, are there precautions that our children should take when participating in sports in general?
Well, in general, that's a huge topic because there's so many different sports that youth today have access to, and even more than when you and I were growing up. Like lacrosse, rugby, so many different options. In general, when you're have a youth going out for any sport, I mean, first of all, see if they're interested in it. These sports at young ages, they're not professional athletes. They should fun and enjoy what they're doing, and not just because you think they might be talented at it. They should show an interest in wanting to do that sport. The second really important thing is the coaching. Especially with football, football is a collision sport. You cannot get rid of any type of injury 100%. You can't eliminate concussion 100%. It's impossible in a collision sport. But there are ways that you can teach your team, and hopefully the other team coaches are teaching them the same way on how to more safely participate in that sport. Proper tackling, keeping your head up, not using your head as a weapon, and just grinding that in at an earlier age, as early as they start. Is helpful. and helpful to change a culture that will, progress to the NFL eventually, and at that level, because the athletes that are there now are having a really tough time, adjusting to different rules because of increased medical information that we've got on the dangers of concussion. Whenever you're starting and have your athletes, young children athletes starting in the sport, before they start, they should start some conditioning because, most orthopedic type injuries are basically in two categories. One is like an overuse, where you're overusing tendons and ligaments and bones and stress fractures because they're not used to that type of stress. And then the other one is, your typical ankle sprains or ankle fractures or wrist fractures, more like a accident while either practicing or playing. Certainly both of those can be minimized by, being in relatively good condition when you start the sport, as opposed to using the sport to get you into shape. You start off in shape, and that can limit the accidents or the injuries on the field or the practice field, because if you start to fatigue and tire, then you're more susceptible to those types of like injuries and fractures and sprains, because you're fatigued and you're still trying to do something. For the overuse, that is what really helps in that is, like, especially in young kids, is not concentrating on just one sport. Like doing more than one sport. If they show a affinity to or an aptitude for sports, then don't just say, well, we're going to make you a baseball pitcher, or we're going to make you a basketball player, and yeah, you're 10 years old, but you're going to be doing these like AAU teams, and then your youth team, and you'll be playing like one thing year round. It's certainly that leads to potential for overuse injuries, and in young athletes, we're not talking about college level. In young athletes, they really shouldn't specialize. They should be exposed to a multitude of sports, especially if they like a multitude of sports.
Dr. Derek, my next question is, so my son, as I mentioned before, he's played youth football for 2 years. He's also into swimming. So I totally agree with you, and you have given excellent advice, because I told him not to totally focus on football, but we got to do other things. We have to do other things. So he spends, during the off seasons, he spends time swimming with his local swim team. But in cases primarily with the football or heavy contact type sports, what happens when your children are sore, or if they get injured? Because usually if my son is sore, or if there's like an ankle sprain or anything, I just pull him out of practice. I'll speak with the coach and leave it at that. But is
Right.
that usually best practice?
Well, I mean, it's for like orthopedic injuries, like injuries to your arms or legs.
Correct. Yeah, it's like
that's injury. Playing for Washington. That isn't something that you're gonna just like. We'll pull you out of the game and just have you rest your broken leg. It's pretty obvious that that's going to require like having like an orthopedic surgeon, addressing that. But in general, twist their ankle or they get tackled and their arms stretched out and their wrist is a little sore, then certainly pull them out because they're not a professional athlete. It doesn't really matter whether they play the next quarter. Like a week from now, nobody's even going to remember whether they played a quarter or not. And and then just see if they can just move their wrist or move their ankle, and then ice it, elevate to decrease the swelling, and then see how it goes for the next couple of days. Now, if they're in a lot of pain, and so for an ankle, like sometimes kids, their growth plates are weaker than adults. So in something that could sprain an adult's ankle, that can actually be a fracture to a kid's ankle. So, if they're limping significantly or you see a lot of swelling, that would be something in a youth that I would say that deserves like a call to your local orthopedic surgeon, or if it's after hours at night, you might want to go to the emergency room in that setting, just because the kids are not just little adults. Okay, they have different types of injuries, and sometimes what is not a big deal in an adult could be something that would be a bigger deal in a child.
Gotcha. We're speaking with expert sports medicine doctor and orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Derek Ochiai. A couple of questions about baseball, because baseball season is rapidly. In another month or so, we're going to be talking about opening day, and we got millions of boys across America, ages 4 to 6, that will play one of the most and old and loved sports, which is baseball, and it's really my favorite sport. One of the most common injuries to children and even athletes in baseball today is an injury to the elbow. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us what's the reason behind elbow injuries?
I mean, the number one reason is overuse in pitching. Like whether you're a professional baseball player or even like in Little League, if you throw too much, when you throw, you put a lot of stress on your elbow. And, once you get to a professional level throwing velocity, their velocity is actually reaching the breaking point to the Tommy John ligament. So it's like it is like you're like teetering on an edge when you're at that level, because each pitch, each 99 mile an hour fastball that you're doing is right at the absolute limit that your elbow can actually tolerate physically. So, if you start to fatigue or you start to overthrow, a little bit, a change in your mechanics, a little bit of compensation, changing your angle slightly, all of those things could make it so it'd be more likely that your shoulder tips over that precipice and you injure like your Tommy John ligament, which is the most common elbow injury in pitchers.
Dr. Derek, what is Tommy John surgery? Because we hear about it so often. We know that most of these players, they miss a year and they come back and their arm is almost bionic-like. And some players come back even stronger, and some players, it might be just the opposite. So what Correct. Is your definition of Tommy John surgery?
Well, there's a ligament on if you hold your hand facing the sky, and where your pinky finger is, if you follow that up your arm to your elbow, there's a ligament right there that helps to hold your elbow in place. When you throw, you can actually feel, like if you put your finger on that same area and you put your arm back into a throwing position, you can feel that there's some tension on that area. That's the ligament holding your elbow into place. That's the ligament that can get damaged and torn with things like excessive throwing. So the Tommy John surgery is named after the pitcher who was the first professional pitcher to have that surgery performed, where you use a tendon graft and you weave it between the bones to take the place of that ligament. So if you know what an ACL reconstruction is in the knee, where they take a tendon and then reconstruct the anterior cruciate ligament, lots of basketball players get ACL injuries. If you know what that is, it's exactly the same type of surgery in your elbow. It's just your elbow is a lot smaller, but it's the same basic premise as you're using a tendon graft to take the place of a damaged ligament.
Is it normal for youth athletes to have Tommy John surgery, or is something like this only for our adult athletes?
Unfortunately, it's not uncommon in youth in like ages 15 to. It's not uncommon. Certainly, as as doctors and as medical professionals, we are trying to limit those types of injuries. We're trying to institute pitch counts and have coaches stick to that so that you're not overthrowing and putting more pitches on an elbow, especially as it's still developing and growing. But that injury can still happen. I mean, the throwing motion, a professional baseball player is throwing harder, but they're also bigger, and they've also had more time for their elbow to adapt to the increased stress of throwing at 99 miles per hour. So even in youth, that injury can happen, and while you can limit the chances of it happening with pitch counts, if somebody's going to be a pitcher, it can happen.
And we're speaking with sports medicine doctor and orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Derek Ochiai. Dr. Derek, I want to thank you for joining us. This interview will air on our next show. For any of our listeners, if they wanted to get in contact with you or find out about any of your writings or visit you, if they're in the local area, what's the best way they should get in contact with you or find you on social media?
Yeah, well, certainly, all of my contact information is on our website, and that's www.nirschl.com. That's NIRSCHL.com. Certainly, I'm pretty active on Twitter, so if you wanted to follow me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is at Dr. Derek Ochiai. It's at DRDEREKOCHIAI.
All right. Thanks so much, and hope to speak with you very soon, maybe before the baseball season starts.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much, sir.
Bye.
Bye-bye.